Okay, this is chapter 20 from this book, The Medical Reformation. This chapter is about heavy metal toxins. We're going to talk about things like mercury. We're going to talk about aluminum. We're going to talk about a couple other heavy metal toxins in this chapter as well. We'll start out, I think, talking about aluminum. Okay, so aluminum has a relatively fixed charge of 3 plus, fixed valence. And that's a problem because it can kind of mimic magnesium. Magnesium is 2 plus, but still aluminum can get involved in some of these reactions that magnesium does, including interacting with negatively charged phosphates. So a positive charge will want to interact with a negative charge. And that ends up being a pretty big deal, as we'll talk about here. You can take aluminum into your body in a lot of different ways. You can inhale it just because it's in air pollution in the trails, the chem, with the planes flying overhead. That's putting aluminum into the air that you inhale, and it goes through your nose, the olfactory nerve for smell. It'll go to your brain that way. So it's actually more dangerous inhaled than it is if you drink it. Other things about it, yeah, like you don't ever want to go by an active volcano. They appear to have a lot of that. So that's a stupid thing to do, but that's a rare thing. You don't want to be eating off aluminum cookware. You don't want to be drinking anything out of a aluminum can. You don't want to be working with the stuff at a job. You don't ever want to put your food in aluminum foil, okay? It's a sign of mental weakness and stupidity to do that. Just say no. You go to if you ever go to a place where they have to wrap your food and you have a choice, you say wax paper. You don't put it in aluminum. Aluminum is an anti-caking agent, so it's in a lot of these salts. You don't want that. It's in some baking powders. This is another reason why I try to be real simple. It just makes it easier to avoid stuff. It's in tap water, and they're going to tell you, well, it's a clarifying agent. It binds things to it, so it makes the water look more clear. But it's actually, has synergistic toxin. It combines with fluoride to become a more aggressive neurotoxin. So what I'm basically saying here is I think when you get right down to it, the billionaire perverts who run the world, they hate your guts. They think you're a piece of crap, a useless eater. And they put F minus in your water and a synergistic neurotoxin in there as well, aluminum. They're not doing that because they like you, okay? They want you stupid and docile, a good obedient little slave. Okay, so what I'm saying is it's relatively ubiquitous in the environment, and the only way you're going to avoid it is you have to make a pretty significant effort. You can move to a place where you got well water and it's not in your water. You could filter it out with reverse osmosis, with distillation. I don't know if the ion exchange, that's kind of a new thing, how well those work. And maybe there's other ways too, but I certainly wouldn't be drinking this stuff. I think it's quite variable how sensitive some people are to it. Some are more sensitive to it than others. It can be concentrated in tea. I know they'll tell you, oh, well, you don't absorb it as much. I still wouldn't drink it. I think this whole tea thing is kind of bogus. Plus the caffeine, I'm not a fan of it. It's toxic in other ways. Aluminum's like toxic to your whole body. It doesn't belong in your body at all. We talked about it being in deodorants. It's worse if you shave. You get increased transdermal absorption. It plugs up the sweat glands, so that's why it's a deodorant, okay? But it's also a metalloestrogen, and then it's in the shared lymphatics between the breast and the armpit, and that's thought to be a major contributor to the increased risk of breast cancer. It used to be that only 25% of breast cancer, 30% of breast cancer was upper outer quadrant. Nowadays, it's like 60%. So that's a big increase, and that's since the 1920s, so it's been like a doubling of it, and that's thought to be primarily due to deodorant. Let's see, what else? It accumulates in your brain and your balls, in ovaries of a woman. Like I said, it can replace magnesium and thus interact with membrane ATPase. Because remember, the potassium sodium ATP pump requires magnesium. All these ATP reactions require magnesium to hang on to the phosphates. Because of magnesium got the 2 plus positive charge, it can grab onto those negatively charged phosphates. Well, aluminum with its 3 plus charge can do something very similar. So it's going to be associated with lower IQ. Wherever there's higher levels of aluminum in the drinking water, the dementia rates in those populations are higher. It's also found inside the beta amyloid plaques. Those are the ones that are extracellular in the brain at autopsy. And the neurofibrillary tangles. Those are the ones that are intracellular primarily with hyperphosphorylated tau. Here's another scary thing. Aluminum will form complexes with fluoride, and this will help traversal of the blood-brain barrier. I'm not sure the exact mechanism how that works. I know fluoride is put on lots of drugs to get them increased passage into the brain. You look at the antibiotic fluoroquinolones. Look at Prozac. You know that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, antidepressant drug. What is that? Fluoxetine. Whenever you hear this flu stuff, then you should be thinking fluoride in there. Okay. And, fluoride got that good reputation for helping the teeth, so everybody thinks it's no big deal. No, it's a neurotoxin, okay? It lowers IQ. It causes brain damage. They're both excitotoxins. They make you stupider. They accelerate the rate at which a person becomes demented. They're for chumps. Okay, aluminum also appears to help other toxins enter the brain, like arsenic. PB is lead, Hg is mercury, Mn is manganese. Okay, now here's this lady, Stephanie Seneff. She's pretty famous for her research on glyphosate. She wrote a very good book called Toxic Legacy. It's a little bit of a dense book in the sense that, it would have been better if she put illustrations in it. I made some illustrations about protein structure in another chapter in this book, and maybe it was in my earlier chapter on proteins, and how glyphosate can substitute for glycine. That's what she's a big proponent of. The glyphosate, think of it as glycine phosphate. Okay, you might want to call it officially glyphosate, but it just makes sense to call it glycine phosphate. So it can replace glycines in proteins, sort of like a Trojan horse mechanism, if you will. And once it gets into the protein, it can cause it to dysfunction, because now you got this big bulky phosphate group with its negative charge, getting in the way of things, unlike the real small glycine that's used for making tight, all kinds of tight things, like the triple helix, collagen, like enzyme active sites, because it's small. It doesn't crowd other things out. That's one of its unique benefits. Glycine, all it has for a side group as an amino acid is a hydrogen. So it's the smallest amino acid. And now you stick this bulky phosphate on there, it messes things up. Now, also, just to give you a different point of view, so you've heard it before, there's this guy, Jack Delatorre. He's a real famous guy. He wrote the book Alzheimer's Turning Point. It's a great book. And he's the proponent of, I call it the mouse equivalent theory, tying off the mouse carotids, causing hypoperfusion of the brain, hypovascularity. And he says, no, aluminum is not the main cause of so-called Alzheimer's dementia. Okay, so he has some big points. He feels that the incidence of so-called Alzheimer's dementia is similar in areas where they don't have much aluminum in their exposure for the people, and he thinks that it's not the main player. There's other people who've reviewed the literature, like Dr. McDougall, also like Jeff Nelson at VegSource, and they're pretty impressed about all the literature indicating a strong correlation between aluminum and dementia. Me personally, and I've studied it a lot as well, I think that aluminum is a major neurotoxin that contributes to dementia. It's just that it's one of many, okay? It's a very powerful one. I think it's a major contributor to dementia, but I think there's a whole bunch of other things going on that don't get as much press, if you will. This guy right here, Christopher Exley, PhD, devoted his whole life to researching aluminum. His nickname is Mr. Aluminum, and he's written an entire book on the subject, and he's written tons of papers on the subject. And you're always going to see a little bit of a bias, okay? Because Delatorre's theory is the mouse equivalent theory of vascular hypothesis. It's also called the so-called Alzheimer's. He's going to push his theory, okay? And Exley is the big believer of the aluminum hypothesis, so he's going to push his theory. So there's always going to be some bias. You just look at it, and then you look at the data that supports it and try to figure out what's reality. Okay, so Exley spent a whole career linking aluminum exposure to all kinds of brain problems, including autism, including multiple sclerosis. Aluminum accumulates in the pineal gland, which makes melatonin. It's important for sleep, so it's thought that by its accumulating there, it could be detrimental to sleep. But guess what? Fluoride also accumulates in the pineal gland and damages it. So they're both bad. And they're both in your drinking water, your tap water in most municipal cities, okay? Yeah, that's why, like I say, anything sort of public means it's for chumps. You have to be careful about that. Now, here's another scary thing. Remember, I've given lectures before on are they trying to sterilize you? Aluminum is in your tap water, and it contributes to infertility. So does fluoride. That's in your tap water. So do all those estrogenic chemicals. They're in your tap water. So does all that stuff in processed food, like atrazine sprayed on all the corn, like soy itself, intrinsically estrogenic. And yes, it activates the good and the bad estrogen receptor. Because people will try to tell you it only activates the good estrogen receptor. That's not true. I talked about that on my soy videos. Okay, aluminum also increases leaky gut. So if it increases leaky gut, it's going to increase autoimmune disease and all the irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and all that stuff. Oh, here's one point that, it also lowers male sperm counts, but some aluminum is excreted from the body in the sperm. So spanking the monkey is one way a person could lower their aluminum level a little bit. Also, what gets promoted are these drinking waters that contain silica. This guy Exley is a big fan of that. So in the United States, Fuji water is sort of famous for containing silica. There's other ones that contain silica, and they could reduce it. I'm not a big fan of bottled water because then you're drinking out of a plastic container that's also going to have estrogenic chemicals in it. But for what it's worth, that's one thing that Mr. Aluminum recommends. It increases blood-brain barrier permeability. So you can see it has a similar effect. I'm sure it's probably to a minor degree, but still it's a similar effect to head trauma. What do I mean by that? Well, head trauma, while it increases blood-brain barrier permeability, it also increases leaky gut. So you got increased intestinal permeability. That means a toxin in your gut has increased ability to get through your intestinal barrier, and then increased ability to get through your abnormal, relatively open blood-brain barrier simultaneously. So that allows the toxin more access to your brain. It's all bad. There's nothing good about this. The only good thing about it here is to learn about it so you can avoid it better. Okay? Okay, inflammation. It increases inflammation. It increases some of these, inflammatory cytokines, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha, IL-6. And because it does these things will have a tendency sometimes to increase inducible nitric oxide synthase, and they can lead to increased production of peroxynitrite, increased intracellular peroxynitrite. So there's another mechanism of neurotoxicity. It's also toxic to mitochondria. So mitochondrial inhibition, all right, increased production of peroxynitrite, a major neurotoxin, which also damages mitochondria and neurons. I went through this previously in my Martin Pall lecture. I think it was just a chapter or two ago. All right, it increases the risk of diabetes, aluminum, because it'll increase the risk of beta cell necrosis. So you can see what a disaster this is. If you're eating these omega-6 cooking oils, which are also thought to be toxic to the beta cells by the Yamashima theory of lipid peroxidation with subsequent generation of toxic aldehydes like hydroxynonenal, and those are toxic to beta cells. And then you're also drinking tap water with aluminum in it, inhaling trails of, chemistry in there. A lot of things with a harmful effect on your pancreas, not to mention you're eating a high-fat diet causing insulin resistance. Okay, they think it can cause some lung inflammation. I don't think that's that major of a factor with it, just because I look at a lot of chest CTs. I don't see that much pulmonary fibrosis. Immunosuppression, I don't see a significant amount of increased pulmonary fibrosis compared to what I saw in the past. So I don't see that changing. I do see tons more dementia nowadays than I used to. So I think that is rapidly going up. We all know there's a lot more obesity, hypertension, diabetes. All these things all track together. Obesity, hypertension, impotence, coronary artery disease, cognitive decline. And I can also tell you, I see these patients and, they're diabetic. They have all, 20 different problems. And I'll try to help them and talk to them. But a lot of times, by the time they get 60 and older, the majority of them, they're so cognitively slow. They've lost the vitality of life. I mean, it's irreversible. Because that's one thing, too. A lot of people think, medicine in America, our doctors are so well educated. American medicine is so good. No, it's a joke, okay? They never cure anybody with diabetes. They've got learned helplessness, all right? And I can tell you, once I see these patients over 60 and they're all cognitively slow, very pleasant and nice, but just, kind of like a cow. Yes, please, thank you. I mean, it's over. They're on the highway to dementia hell, and there ain't no turning back, okay? You got to be with it. You got to say, hey, I've screwed up, okay? I've been drinking water with aluminum in it. I've been eating all this processed food. I've been drinking water with F- in it, and there's atrazine in my processed food. I got to stop eating this stuff. I'm going to... So you have to be like that, and like I said, death by 1,000 cuts. You got to systematically make a list of all these things that are toxic, and I've given you all this stuff, and then start avoiding all that stuff. You'll notice right at the beginning of the book, I think it was right on like page 1, I put the 10 Commandments at the beginning because it's kind of fun. I want to show the book's going to be different and fun. Then I put a couple of key pictures because I want to also show it's going to be illustrated and fun. You got to put the good stuff right at the beginning of the book, otherwise people won't ever read it. But I did something kind of funny with this book. I basically like to break all the rules. So they say never tell the reader key points right at the beginning, because then why else would they continue to read the book? So just to make a joke out of that, I put a one-page summary right on the first page of the first chapter of all the stuff to do. I initially had said something as if you're too lazy and stupid to read this book, here's a one-page summary of it. But then what ends up happening is there's all kinds of formatting issues, and I ran out of space, so I had to remove that. I actually like putting those comments in there. I have fun with that. I need something to amuse myself. My life is so boring. But anyways, best way to measure bodily aluminum is in a 24-hour collection of urine. Oh, you also excrete it from your sweat. So if you exercise a lot, you sweat. A lot of good things happen from exercise. You're going to sweat some of that out of your body. You know, maybe they're going to have some chelating agents. I don't know. I'd be a little scared of some of those chelating agents, but that might be a useful thing in the future. It's always in the future. You know, like I said, you know, it's like the old joke from Alice in Wonderland. Jam tomorrow, jam yesterday, but never jam today. It's kind of like asking the wife to make the two-bag beast. All right, well, anyways, enough of that. That's what I'm trying to say. It's always pie in the sky with some new miracle pharmaceutical that's going to save your life. In the meantime, will you sign your name on a clinical trial and then you get wiped out by the drug with no benefit? Okay, I would never go into one of those things. I mean, if something works, it works. And even when they say it works, a lot of times it doesn't work. So if they don't know if it works, then it probably really, really, really doesn't work. And if they have to consent you, it probably has a lot of side effects. Okay, Exley, world expert on it, he says that he thinks that AL and senile plaques, like in beta amyloid plaques, associated with so-called Alzheimer autopsy findings, he believes what's happening is you're getting iron redox cycling, and he believes that a lot of oxidative stress is generated and it's accentuated by the aluminum. He didn't give a specific mechanism, but this guy studied it all his life, and he said if he had to come up with one major mechanism of aluminum toxicity, he believed it was increasing oxidative stress. It could increase oxidative stress by being toxic to mitochondria. Anything that's toxic to mitochondria, quite often, like the electron transport chain on the inner mitochondrial membrane, is going to cause it to back up, and then you're going to start dropping electrons from the electron transport chain. You start dropping them onto oxygens in the mitochondrial matrix, and then you're going to generate superoxides. And you generate superoxides, that's reactive oxygen species, you're going to have a lot more oxidative stress. And he thinks that's the number one reason why aluminum is so incredibly toxic. Okay, that's worth knowing. That really is worth knowing, because remember what I told you, all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to calcium. So this is also going to be an excitotoxin, right? It damages your mitochondria. You can't make that ATP that you need to pump the calcium out. So the brain cell is screwed, the worse that gets. And that's my Peter Rogers, MD theory of neurovascular uncoupling. And it's really a big expansion of the previous calcium hypothesis. And so the bottom line is you need energy to pump out calcium. Okay. He felt that it contributes also to multiple sclerosis, and he also thinks to autism. And the reason he did that is he did a lot of, he feels that it binds to myelin, the insulating fat on brain cells, and it distorts it, and he thinks that leads to the formation of autoantibodies. He did a bunch of autopsies, and he found increased aluminum in the brains of people with Alzheimer's, increased aluminum in the brains of people with multiple sclerosis, increased aluminum in the brains of people with autism. So here's his book, Imagine You Are an Aluminum Atom. Discussions with Mr. Aluminum. That's him. His nickname is Mr. Aluminum. His whole research on there, he's a PhD guy. Focus has been on aluminum. I do think there's good videos, Dr. McDougall at his place, and Jeff Nelson over at VegSource. They've made some really excellent videos summarizing tons of papers. There's tons of papers showing what a disaster aluminum is. It's not like there's one or two. There's like 1,000 or more. It's for real. Okay, so here's a paper just saying aluminum causes leaky gut. So at first you go, okay, it causes leaky gut. So what? No, that's a big deal. Once you know it causes leaky gut, it actually causes leaky gut in multiple ways. It'll kill the enterocytes, the lining cells of the intestine. Okay, That's bad. It opens up tight junctions. That's bad. It increases reactive oxygen species. Like I told you, it can inhibit mitochondria. You'll drop more superoxide. You'll drop more electrons from the inner mitochondrial membrane, electron transport chain down on the superoxide, and that's going to cause this vicious cycle of oxidative stress, which can damage the inner mitochondrial membrane. It causes abnormalities in immune function. It increases inflammation. And according to this study, exposure to aluminum caused a 38-fold increase in oxidative stress when the formation of superoxide anions. Like I said, it can inducible nitric oxide synthase, disaster. Okay, here's one saying that aluminum pretreatment impairs the ability of astrocytes to protect neurons from glutamate. So glutamate is the best known excitotoxin. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter. It's over 90%. So 90% of your neurotransmitters in your brain. And so under normal circumstances, it's made to be an excitotransmitter. It actually is a good thing under normal circumstances. But when you increase that with psychological stress equivalents, drinking caffeine, stress equivalents, sleep deprivation, and then you start throwing this on top of it, these neurotoxins like fluoride in your tap water, aluminum in your tap water, aluminum inhalation from deodorants, from the trails in the sky, cooking on aluminum cookware, putting your food in aluminum foil, aluminum in your salt for anti-caking agents, okay, using it for deodorant, okay, it's really adding up. That's why I think to be at your top form, you really want to be a minimalist. Being a minimalist helps you psychologically because you don't waste time and energy on trivia, but it also helps you for health by minimizing your exposure to all these toxins. Okay. Okay, now here's another one. Synergism between aluminum and mercury neurotoxicity. So there's a lot more mercury in processed food than people realize. So again, if you're having your typical chump meal, let's say you're drinking soda pop out of an aluminum can with aluminum leaching into the food. How about a baby food in an aluminum can leaching into the baby's food? And then there's a little plastic lining inside the can of BPA, bisphenol A, or something similar to it. That leaches into the food. Estrogenic, neurotoxic. They're all neurotoxic. Aluminum's a neurotoxin. High fructose corn syrup is routinely contaminated with mercury. That's a neurotoxin. Okay, BPA, yeah, we know it's estrogenic, but it's also a mitochondrial inhibitor. It's a neurotoxin, okay? So you can imagine, there's a lot of neurotoxin exposure in the United States. And I think that's a big part of why people are getting stupider and stupider. Let's see. Significant synergism and neurotoxicity when aluminum and mercury were added together. Great. Okay, here's a good book. It's written by this lady doctor. Her name is Jane Hightower. And she was in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she sort of ended up getting these patients that were yuppies that were cognitively impaired. Middle-aged yuppies in their 40s, let's say, 50s. And nobody quite knew what to do with these people. You do a brain MRI, and the brain MRI looked normal. And they thought they had tested them appropriately for toxicology, but she said, hold on a second. She had a better way of testing for toxicology. And she started picking up one after another patient high in alumina. Here's what I thought was funny about it. They were primarily a bunch of yuppies who were trying to be healthy, so they were eating more fish. I thought that was funny because, they're making themselves sick. The fish is full of mercury. I can also tell you, as a rule of thumb, anything that you read in a newspaper, anything that you read in a magazine about nutrition and toxicology, in my experience, it's pretty much always wrong. Not always. Let's say 99% of the time it's wrong. Because, anything you go to a medical meeting, the official hospitals, they're going to tell you eat a Mediterranean diet most of the time. Completely stupid, okay? So I'm also going to tell you, lots of, stupid moron doctors tell people that fish is good for you. Okay, that's a very common thing you hear. No, it's completely stupid. All you have to do is use basic logic. How could something that's full of estrogenic chemicals, that's full of mercury, that's super high in fat, that's quite acidic, that's routinely fried, that lives in the sewer? The oceans and the lakes are basically a sewer in the modern world, okay? How could that be good for you? All right, so once they stopped eating the fish, most of them got better. Some of them had permanent brain damage, though. Mercury, it increases blood-brain barrier permeability, as does fluoride, as does aluminum. So all these things are opening up the blood-brain barrier to toxins. So right there, minimize your exposure to those three things. You'll have less brain fog. Mercury is a mitochondria inhibitor too, so it's going to decrease your ability to make ATP. So it's an excitotoxin, okay? Glyphosate in processed food, it's an excitotoxin, okay? It's a mitochondria inhibitor. And it also increases NMDA receptor activity to let more calcium into the cell. BPA, the estrogenic, it's a mitochondria inhibitor. I went through mitochondria inhibitors just a couple lectures ago. There's tons of them, okay? And so aluminum and mercury, these heavy metals, all make that stuff worse and increase your risk of dementia. Okay, let's see. Almost all of it was due to eating fish. Oh, she had a good line. She said when people say they got brain fog, she says most of the time it's fish fog. Mercury from fish. I thought that was funny. She says they got to get their blood levels down to below 5 micrograms per liter. It's in her book, like I said, Hightower, on her page 245. I think I did a book review of that, or I certainly talked about it when I talked about aluminum previously. Oh, here's another good book. This one is called Unsafe at Any Meal. And this lady here is Renee Dufall. She's a pretty interesting lady. She was a researcher, and she kept finding out that there's more and more mercury in all this processed food. And she actually retired from her job so she could do more research on it because she was amazed at how bad it was. Like I said, the way I think processed food works is imagine you're a billionaire pervert and you look around and you're like, you know, there's so much traffic in the city, there's so much pollution in the city, and all these people, you know, they're a bunch of useless eaters, you know, all they do is waste the resources of the world. How could we reduce their numbers? Well, we could put aluminum in their food to make them stupid and infertile. We could also use atrazine on their processed food, make them stupid and infertile. We could also put mercury in the high fructose corn syrup, make them more stupid. And the atrazine helps sterilize them. The aluminum will help sterilize them. What else can we sterilize them with? The soil helps sterilize them. So it all just keeps adding up. And there's a whole bunch more of them. All the estrogenic chemicals in their tap water help sterilize them. We can spray some of that in the sky, help sterilize all these useless eaters. I'm telling you, if you read what is really going on, you'll be amazed. It's already been in writing for decades. The major problem with the world, according to some of the billionaire perverts, is overpopulation. So they need methods to reduce the population. And the useless eaters are not going to want to reduce their population voluntarily. So you have to do it with all these indirect chemicals. I would call them slow poisons. Okay? And so that's what's being done. And if you think I'm exaggerating, that's because you don't know anything about it. If you actually study it, you'll see that I'm understating things very much. Okay, so she found that anything that's pushed through a chloralkali processing chemical vat will tend to accumulate mercury. And it turns out lots of industrial chemicals are. Of course, high fructose corn syrup. But a lot of other things that are common, you know, HCl, hydrochloric acid, chlorine, you know, potassium hydroxide, they'll have it, okay? Caustic soda, NaOH. These are some common industrial chemicals, okay? And here's a good one. Dr. Renee Dufall, she noticed that when she looked at the data from these chloralkali companies in the year 2000, they reported that 65 tons of mercury was missing. Do you understand that? This is an industrial company saying that 65 tons of a super powerful neurotoxin, just missing, 65 tons. So where do you think it goes? It's in all the foods that they make. Please, okay? And so I'll just tell you a story. I had a friend who's a molecular biologist, and he had a friend who did research on high fructose corn syrup, and he found out that it was, getting polluted in large amounts by mercury. So he published that article, and once he published that, the industries ganged up on him. They went to his university and said, "Oh, this guy's a jerk. You should fire him." And so that, they get a lot of money from these industries, so they just fired the guy. So when you tell the truth, you get fired. That's what I meant by academics is kind of screwed up because, in sports, the better you get, the more everybody likes you. The better you get in academics, the more the powerful big money players, they hate you. They don't want you teaching the pros, helping the stupid pros, the useless eaters. They want the useless pros reduced in number. Okay, so anybody that's helping the pros is helping them, keeping them alive and reproduce. Don't want that. Okay, in 2004, the average American was eating 36 pounds. That's the average American, 36 pounds. I eat zero, okay? 36 pounds of high fructose corn syrup. So how much mercury went into that? A lot, okay? And here's something funny, too. The food companies would advertise high fructose corn syrup as a preservative. And so what nonsense is that? The reason it's a preservative is because it's got mercury in it. They don't want to say it's because of the mercury. They just say high fructose corn syrup is a preservative. But that's how it works. A lot of food dyes are contaminated by bad things, like they're contaminated by mercury. These ones right here in her book, she lists that, okay, according to Renee Defoe. Blue number 2, yellow number 5, yellow number 6. And then she also says they have allowable levels of mercury, have allowable levels of arsenic and lead. This is toxic crap. She also said that vegetable oils are quite often processed with chloralkali chemicals like sodium hydroxide, and because of that, they will often, she says, contain mercury residues. That's pretty scary. That's another reason why you're not going to win with these oils. You know, run for your life. Don't mess around. Like all the typical stupid person says, I'm doing okay. I'm cutting down on oils. I'm cutting down on meat. I'm cutting down on fish. And it's like, no, you stupid idiot. Run for the hills. You're screwed. You're effed. Okay? You need to say, have an attitude of gratitude. Okay, I'm headed towards dementia, being fat, sick, and stupid like most people in America. But you know, over 60, over 50 even. But I'm not going to go down that path. I got this low-fat vegan diet, organic with no oils. I have a chance to, you know, avoid all this stuff. You need to have an attitude of gratitude. Say, thank you, God. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'm going to make a video later about coronary artery disease that'll be real funny. Okay, I'm not going to tell the joke now, but wait till you see it. I think you're going to like it. It's a good one, and it relates to all this stuff. You know, how a smart person thinks versus a stupid person thinks. A smart person wants to minimize problems, keep their options open. A dummy just says, give me the fastest solution. And then in the meantime, they don't pay attention to all the side effects of it. Okay, so a lot of these oils, you know, Renee Default in her book, page 60 to 62, she says, coconut oil, olive oil, palm oil, canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, all these common cooking oils are at moderate risk for mercury contamination, according to her in her book. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. And a lot of BS artists are trying to tell people olive oil is good for you. Yeah, right. Okay, here's, I think this paper was written by her. Yeah, there's her name, Renee Dufault. And look, she joined with Jane Hightower, the lady who wrote the Mercury book. And she says, industry really likes mercury because it's a preservative. When you increase the shelf life, oh, here's a good one. I think I made this one up. I don't think I heard it from her. I think I made this one up. Maybe I didn't make it up. I think I did, but I don't know. Okay, when you increase shelf life, you decrease your brain life. Okay, because these preservatives, things like mercury, mitochondria inhibitor, things like fungal inhibitors prevent mold growth so it doesn't get returned to the company that made it. It's a mitochondria inhibitor. That means they're brain toxins. Not good. And she lists a whole bunch of other things that often are contaminated by mercury in her opinion. Citric acid, that's in a lot of stuff. That also can contain glutamate in it. Sodium benzoate, that's in a lot of stuff. So all of this is adding up. So like I said, you want to live like Adam and Eve, but keep your indoor heating and plumbing. Be simple. You know, I only eat foods that have a single ingredient. They're allowed to put other things into that second ingredient without telling you. That's the reason why I only eat foods with a single ingredient. Okay. Let's see. Oh, now a little bit on fluoride toothpaste. Fluoride toothpaste causes corrosion of dental amalgams. Dental amalgams have mercury in them. So, like, that's one reason why I did get a cavity when I was younger and had a dental amalgam on there. I would never brush right over it because then you could stir up, release more mercury into your body. Okay, and the worst thing would be to brush your teeth with fluoride toothpaste, which helps to corrode that amalgam. And then you brush right on top of it, you're releasing mercury into your body. Stupid. Plus, you're combining it with this other neurotoxin, the fluoride. I recommend don't put any fluoride in your body at all. Zero, none. And don't let your kids get dental treatments with that stuff. It's a brain poison, okay? And dentists, most of them, you know, they're kind of idiots. They don't know that fluoride's a major neurotoxin. You know, open a book, guys. There's a whole bunch of books on it. There's tons of papers on it. And like I said, it's the old saying, it's hard to get somebody to see something as a problem when they're making money off of it. Okay, but a lot of dentists end up kind of crazy. You know, like Mad as a Hatter was from mercury toxicity, and some of these dentists are kind of crazy and I think it's from mercury toxicity. Okay, here's a good book. This guy, Mike Adams. It's called Food Forensics. There's also an audio book for it. I read the book and I listened to the audio CD. I thought it was pretty good. Food toxins are worse than you think. There's some countries where there's so much pollution that the word organic is meaningless in those countries. And there's a lot more toxins in foods than person thinks. So that's another reason too. Sometimes people say, "Oh, why don't I like all these spices?" Well, I'm pretty careful. A lot of these spices are contaminated with mercury and other toxins. That's one reason why I don't. I'm simple. I don't bother. I'm always thinking about like what I want to do. Like let's say I come home from work. I had a long day at work. All right, and then I want to do one of my videos, whatever I'm interested in at the moment. Okay, let's say it's talking about excitotoxins in the brain. Well, that's what I'm thinking about. I don't want to spend extra time cooking. I know some people love to cook, and don't get me wrong, if somebody cooks for me and the food's good, I love it. But I'm not going to spend time thinking about it myself because you can only focus on a few things in life, so you have to decide what you want. And I guess for me, that's not an issue. But anyways, he goes through all this stuff, all the kinds of issues with spice contaminants, and then he tested a whole bunch of things to give you the contaminant levels that he got from testing foods, all kinds of foods and different brand names. I thought he did a good job about it. He has some videos too you could watch. Let's see. I made a video review about his book. Oh, then here's a new thing too. This AP and then the letters E, E, and L is this new coating sprayed on a lot of foods, especially sprayed on avocados, but also I've heard it sprayed a lot on apples. And I mean, this sounds insane. Because again, the company doesn't want mold growing on their food because it gets returned to them, but they'll put chemicals on that are real toxic. It contains trans fats. And I don't have the chem sheet in front of me, but I looked up all the chem sheet, allowable contaminants in it. They were major, major neurotoxins. There was several of them, at least 3 of them, and they were major neurotoxins strongly associated with brain damage, major toxicity. I would never eat anything with this crap on it, never. And it's not only called just this name, it's also called Eddie, you know what, peel, Organo, you know what, peel, Ape, you know what, peel. Okay, you don't want this stuff. Like I said, they list it as a fungal inhibitor and acting as if that's harmless. No, to me, fungal inhibitor means mitochondria inhibitor means neurotoxin. Okay. In general, anything that's going to kill a bug or a fungus is going to be bad for you. So you should be aware of that. Okay. Because I've known people doing stupid stuff, indoor gardens, spraying crap on their plants, making themselves really sick. I've known hairdressers spraying all kinds of crap, not ventilating the room and getting real sick. These things are neurotoxic. Okay. All right, I did make several videos about that. AP, you know what, EEL stuff. This grocery store, Natural Grocers, never puts it on their food. There's other places they'll claim they don't ever put it on their food, but sometimes they won't then put it on their website. And you have to ask yourself, can you trust them? And then also, I can tell you, I've talked to a whole bunch of grocery stacker people, and they're real nice, but most of them are total ignoramuses. They don't know anything about the food they're stacking. Like, you go up to the guy who stacks the produce and you ask him, does this have AP, you know what, EEL on it, and he's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, he doesn't know anything about the food. And then what they'll tell you is you got to talk to the buyers. And the buyers apparently come into these grocery stores, a couple days a week in the afternoon or something. So you got to find out when the buyer's there, ask permission to talk to one of them, and then they can maybe tell you what's going on. But it would be nice if they put labels on it. The fact that they don't tell people and the fact they don't put labels on it, that makes me more think that it's toxic. If it was good for you, they would advertise it. There'd be a big sign, come and eat this, it's good for you. They know it's bad for you. They know you don't want it. It's just like MSG. They hide it because they know you don't like it and you know it's bad for you. Okay, nowadays MSG is almost obsolete because they got so much manufactured free glutamate and all these kinds of things. Okay, and then here's just a quick list of some common chemicals that are toxic to the brain. Aluminum, we just talked about it. Mercury in your tap water, in your deodorant, in the sky, in air pollution. We talked about mercury being in a lot of things. They used to use mercury in your contact lenses, okay? And it's in other things too, okay? So is aluminum. It's in a lot of things. Be careful. Avoid it as best you can. Lead, I used to test all the plates for lead. My wife would tell me I'm an obsessive, compulsive, paranoid asshole, but I was like, and because it all came back negative. But I'm like, well, that gives me peace of mind. I'm glad I tested all the plates in the house. Cadmium comes off brake pads, for example, so I'll never sit and eat like at a sidewalk cafe in a busy street so I can inhale the pollution coming off the cars. No, thank you. Carbon monoxide. Give me a minute. I'll be done in a minute. Give me a minute, Holmes. All right, excuse me there. All right, hexane's a major neurotoxin. Toluene's a neurotoxin. That's like liquid paper and some degreasing cleaning agents. Trichloroethylene's another mitochondria inhibitor neurotoxin. That's like dry cleaning. I don't even take my clothes for dry cleaning. I never will ever again because it's so toxic. Mitochondria inhibitors, I gave a whole lecture on that recently. Circuit inhibitors, I talked about that too. Almost anything lots of things that smell bad are circuit inhibitors. Preservatives, like I said, often fungal inhibitors. These herbicides, glyphosate, excitotoxin, atrazine is also a major neurotoxin, mitochondria inhibitor. This is processed food right here. Atrazine is sprayed on all the GMO corn. Glyphosate is sprayed on the GMO soy, GMO oatmeal, not GMO, just oatmeal that's not organic. Beans that are not organic. That's why I won't eat those things unless they're organic. Many pesticides. Many estrogenic chemicals. I told you, Seralini says estrogenic chemicals should no longer be just called EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, or estrogen disrupting chemicals. They should be called ENDCs, endocrine, neurocrine, and neurologic disruptors, because he said 80% of them were neurotoxic. That's a lot. And a lot of the ones that maybe weren't neurotoxic were toxic to the thyroid, therefore they're hypothyroid causing, therefore they're goitrogens, therefore they're also neurotoxins, okay? All this stuff is bad for the brain, man. To protect your brain, you got to be on your go. And like I said, too, not to brag, but I think I'm doing more than most of these other nutrition experts out there. They're always, to the average nutrition expert, their background is like internal medicine or something. Okay, so to them, the ultimate in health is protect the heart. And they'll tell you anything good for the heart is good for the brain. And yeah, that's true. But guess what? There's a whole bunch of other things we don't pay attention to on the heart. They're important for the brain, and here's a list of some of them, okay? And that's worth knowing if you want to keep your smarts. All right, well, that's it for this chapter, and I hope that was helpful to you. So, anyways, there it is. Oops.